The council chamber fell silent as Music Admiral Chinwei stepped to the podium. Around her sat representatives from 47 human colonies, their faces grave. The holographic display showed the latest intelligence. 3 more border stations had gone dark in the past week. The Cravathi Dominion was advancing, and every species in their path had either surrendered or been exterminated. We've received their ultimatum, Chin said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Unconditional surrender within 30 days, or they will consider Earth and all human colonies legitimate military targets. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Councillor Akinquo from the African Union leaned forward. Admiral, our combined fleet is less than a third the size of theirs. Our weapons technology is generations behind. What possible chance do we have? Chin pulled up another display. It showed casualty projections, resource comparisons, technological gaps. The numbers painted a bleak picture. By every metric that mattered in galactic warfare, humanity should have already been conquered. You're right, Chin admitted. By conventional analysis, we should surrender. The Cravathi have defeated 17 civilizations in the past century. Each of those civilizations was more advanced than us. Each had more time to prepare, and each is now extinct or enslaved. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. But there's something they conventional analysis doesn't account for, something that makes humans different. Chin switched the display to historical records from Earth, ancient battles, desperate last stands, impossible victories. Thermopylae, where 300 warriors held back an empire. Stalingrad, where a city refused to fall despite overwhelming odds. The countless moments throughout human history where people chose to fight rather than submit. Every species the Cravathi have faced made the logical choice. Chin continued. They calculated the odds, saw the futility, and surrendered to preserve what they could. But humans have never been particularly good at accepting futility. She pulled up recent footage from the frontier colonies, engineers working around the clock to retrofit civilian ships with weapons, farmers learning to handle military equipment, teachers training as field medics, children as young as 12 volunteering for support roles. The Cravathi don't understand that about us yet, Chin said. They think we're like the others. They think we'll see their strength and collapse. They don't realize that we've built our entire civilization on the idea that some things matter more than survival. Councillor Tanaka from the Asian Coalition spoke up. Are you suggesting we fight? The projections show a 98% casualty rate in any direct engagement. I'm suggesting that numbers don't tell the whole story. Chin replied. Yes, we're outgunned. Yes, we're outnumbered. But we're also the species that invented nuclear weapons to fight ourselves and then chose not to use them. We're the species that went to the moon with less computing power than a modern toaster. We're the species that looks at impossible odds and asks how, not if. She brought up schematics of a new battle strategy. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't efficient, it relied on tactics that no advanced species would consider. Deliberate sacrifice, asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics that ignored every rule of civilized combat. The other species fought the Cravathi like they were playing a game with established rules. Chin explained. They tried to match military might with military might. They lost because they We're playing the wrong game, humans. Wrote the book on fighting dirty, we've spent 10,000 years figuring out how to kill things bigger and stronger than us. It's time we reminded the galaxy why Earth predators evolved to be afraid of us. The chamber erupted in debate. Some called it madness, others called it humanity's only chance. But as Chin looked around the room, she saw something shifting in their eyes. Fear was giving way to something more dangerous. Determination. The Cravathi want us to be logical, Chin said, her voice cutting through the noise. They want us to calculate the odds and surrender. But humanity's greatest moments have never come from logic. They've come from the stubborn refusal to accept that something can't be done. They've come from ordinary people deciding that some lines cannot be crossed regardless of the cost. She closed the displays and looked directly at the council. So here's my recommendation. We tell the Cravathi that humans don't do unconditional surrender. We tell them that if they want our worlds, they'll have to take them, and we make damn sure that taking them costs more than they ever imagined possible. We might not win, but we'll make them remember that they fought us. Every species that comes after will hear the story of what happened when the Cravathi tried to conquer humanity, and maybe, just maybe, that story will matter to someone else facing their own impossible odds. The vote was called. The result was unanimous. Humanity would fight. As the council adjourned, Chin stood alone at the podium looking at the tactical displays. The odds hadn't changed. The Cravathi were still stronger, still more advanced, still more numerous. But now there was something else in the equation: human defiance, and throughout history that had proven to be the most dangerous variable of all. The first Cravathi scout ships arrived at the edge of human space exactly on schedule. They were massive vessels, each one larger than humanity's biggest battleship. Their hulls shimmered with energy shields that could deflect anything in Earth's arsenal. They came expecting either a white flag or token resistance from a species about to die. What they found instead confused them. Commander Vrath studied the sensor readings from his flagship's bridge. The human fleet was scattered across 3 star systems in formations that made no tactical sense. Some ships were positioned near asteroid fields, others lurked close to gas giants. A few hung motionless in the empty void between planets as if waiting for nothing. They're not even trying to mask their forces, his tactical officer reported. Intelligence suggested they would gather everything they had for a single desperate battle. Vrath's mandibles clicked in what passed for a Cravathi smile. Fear has broken their coordination. They don't know whether to fight or flee, so they do neither. Effectively, proceed with the standard subjugation pattern. The Cravathi fleet split into battle groups, each one more than sufficient to overwhelm the scattered human ships. They had done this 17 times before. The pattern never changed. Display overwhelming force, destroy any resistance quickly, and watch the survivors lose hope. But as the first battle group approached a cluster of human vessels near an asteroid field, something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't retreat or form a defensive line. Instead, they scattered further, diving into the asteroid field itself, using the rocks as cover in a way that suggested either desperation or madness. There, running, Vrath's weapons officer said. Should we pursue? Of course, Vrath replied, but carefully. Maintain Formation integrity, the Cravathi ships entered the asteroid field there. Superior sensors easily tracking the fleeing humans. It should have been a simple pursuit. It should have ended in minutes. Then the asteroids exploded. Not the asteroids themselves that would have been detected. Instead, the human ships had seeded the field with thousands of crude mines, barely more sophisticated than explosive charges. With basic proximity sensors, each mine was too small to threaten a Cravathi warship individually, but there were so many of them detonating in carefully timed sequences that they created a cascade of debris that overwhelmed even advanced shields. 3 Cravathi ships lost shield integrity, 2 more took significant hull damage, and the human ships that had seemed to be fleeing turned back, focusing all their firepower on the weakened vessels. It wasn't elegant warfare, it wasn't honorable combat, it was an ambush using tactics that the Cravathi hadn't seen since their own pre-space flight era. Across the other star systems, similar scenes unfolded. Human ships near the gas giant didn't engage the approaching Cravathi fleet. Instead, they detonated nuclear weapons in the planet's upper atmosphere, creating a massive electromagnetic pulse that disrupted the alien ship's sophisticated targeting systems. In those few minutes of electronic chaos, the humans closed to point-blank range and fired everything they had at engine sections and weapon ports. The Cravathi lost 8 ships in the first hour, 8 ships that should have been invulnerable, 8 ships destroyed by a species that should have already surrendered on his flagship. Vrath watched the reports coming in with growing unease. The humans were fighting all wrong. They ignored every principle of space warfare that had been established over millennia. They used weapons the Cravathi considered obsolete. They sacrificed their own ships with a casualness that suggested they valued victory over survival. Get me a tactical analysis, Vrath ordered. I want to know what strategy there. Following, the analysis came back minutes later, and it only deepened his confusion. The humans weren't following any recognizable strategy. They were improvising, adapting, using whatever advantage they could find in each specific situation. It was chaos masquerading as tactics. They're learning, his science officer said quietly, every engagement there, testing our responses and adapting. They lost 12 ships, destroying our 8, but they learned which of our systems are vulnerable to which weapons. They're treating this like an experiment. Vrath felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest, uncertainty. The Cravathi way of war was built on predictability, superior technology, superior numbers, superior tactics. These things always won, but the humans weren't playing that game. They were changing the rules with every engagement. On the human carrier ship Indomitable, Admiral Chin watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. Yes, they were losing ships. Yes, the casualties were mounting, but every Cravathi ship they destroyed was a lesson learned and a message sent. They're reforming their battle groups, her tactical officer reported, pulling back to more defensive formations. Good, Chin replied. They're thinking now, wondering what we'll do next, wondering if their shields will hold, wondering if they're really as invincible as they thought. She pulled up a communication channel to all human ships, all units. Execute Protocol Vanguard. Remember, we're not trying to win today, we're Trying to make them bleed, we're trying to make them afraid across 3-star systems. Human ships that had seemed defeated suddenly activated drives they'd kept in reserve. Civilian transports that had appeared to be fleeing launched waves of missiles that had been disguised as cargo containers. Mining vessels rammed K-Thereth. Cruisers at full acceleration, their crews choosing certain death over retreat. The K-Thereth had expected rational resistance. They got something far more dangerous. Humans fighting like they had nothing left to lose because they'd already decided that some things were worth losing everything for. By the end of the first day, the K-Thereth had lost 19 ships. The humans had lost 43. By every conventional measure, the K-Thereth were winning, but as Commander Vrath looked at the casualty reports, he felt something that no K-Thereth commander had felt in 100 years of conquest: doubt. The humans shouldn't be this difficult. They shouldn't be this costly. And if the first day had been this hard, what would the rest of the war look like? 3 weeks into the war, Commander Vrath stood before the K-Thereth High Command via holographic transmission. His mandibles were still a sign of deep unease among his species. Behind him, the tactical display showed something that should have been impossible. The human defensive line was holding. Explain how a primitive species has cost us 72 warships, the Supreme Commander hissed, her scales darkening with anger. Explain how they continue to resist when our projections showed complete victory within 10 days. Vrath chose his words carefully. They do not fight like any species we have encountered. They do not value their ships. They do not value their lives. Every engagement is a calculated sacrifice designed to inflict maximum damage. They have turned warfare into mathematics where their side of the equation doesn't include survival. Impossible, another high command member interjected. Self-preservation is universal. All species prioritize survival, not humans, Vrath replied. Quietly, we captured some of their wounded. During interrogation, one of them said something that our translators struggled with. The closest approximation was, we don't need to win, we just need to make you wish you'd never found us. The transmission fell silent across the K-Thereth command network. Admirals who had conquered 17 civilizations struggled to understand an enemy that weaponized hopelessness itself. On Earth, Admiral Chin sat in the war room beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing the state of humanity's defense. The numbers looked terrible. 40% of the fleet was gone. 12 colonies had been evacuated. Casualty lists grew longer every day, but there were other numbers too. Numbers that mattered more. K-Thereth fleet advance has slowed by 63%, her intelligence officer reported. They're taking twice as long to secure each system. Their supply lines are stretched thin because they have to leave ships behind to guard against our hit-and-run attacks. Chin nodded. And morale. Their intercepted communications show increased stress. Medical transports are overwhelmed. They're requesting reinforcements for the first time in their military history. It was working. Not the way victory usually worked. Humanity wasn't winning battles or reclaiming territory, but they were doing something perhaps more important. They were making the K-Thereth question whether conquering humanity was worth the cost. Chin pulled up a communication. channel to every human ship, station, and colony. It was time. This is Admiral Chin to all human forces. For 3 weeks we've held the line, not by being stronger but by being more stubborn than our enemy could imagine. We've taught them that humans don't break when you push us. We dig in, we adapt, we survive, and most importantly, we make you pay for every inch. She paused, looking at the faces of her staff around her, young and old, civilian and military, all of them tired, all of them afraid, and all of them still here. Today we begin the next phase, Operation Prometheus. Every ship, every station, every colony begins broadcasting the full record of this war. On all frequencies, we want the galaxy to see what happened here. We want every species that the K-Thera threatens next to know that resistance is possible, that tyrants can bleed, that the strong can be made to hesitate. Across human space, the broadcasts began, not propaganda but raw footage. K-Thera ships burning, human vessels sacrificing themselves to protect colony, evacuation ships, farmers fighting with mining equipment, engineers dying to keep shield generators running. The desperate, ugly, beautiful truth of humanity's stand. And then something unexpected happened. The first message came from a species called the Varani, who had surrendered to the K-Thera 40 years earlier. It was brief. We see you, we remember, you are not alone. Then another message from the Talmuth Confederacy, your courage shames our surrender. What can we do? Within hours, messages poured in from across the galaxy, species that had been conquered, enslaved, or forced into vassalage, species that had calculated the odds and chosen survival over resistance. They had all been waiting, hoping for someone to prove that they K-Thera weren't invincible. Humanity had given them that proof, written in blood and fire across 3-star systems. Commander Virath watched as his intelligence officers translated the flood of transmissions now filling the galactic networks. Resistance movements were forming on conquered worlds. Vassal species were questioning their treaties. The entire carefully constructed K-Thera dominion was beginning to crack. They're not trying to defeat us, Virath realized aloud. They're trying to inspire everyone else to rise up. They've turned this war into a message. He looked at the casualty projections. If the war continued at this rate, the K-Thera would eventually win, but the cost would be catastrophic, and more importantly, it would prove to every species in the galaxy that the K-Thera could be hurt, that resistance was survivable, that surrender wasn't inevitable. The Supreme Commander's face appeared on his display. Commander Virath, the High Command has reached a decision. We are offering humanity a conditional peace. They keep their core worlds. We withdraw from human space. In exchange, they cease broadcasting these transmissions and agree to a non-aggression pact. Virath's mandibles clicked in surprise. In 17 conquests, the K-Thera had never negotiated, never offered terms, never retreated. They've already won. The Supreme Commander continued, her voice heavy with something that might have been respect, not militarily but strategically. If we continue, we prove their point. If we withdraw, we at least stop the bleeding. Sometimes, Commander, the greatest victory is knowing when to stop fighting. When the K-Thera peace offer reached Earth, Admiral Chin read it twice to make sure she understood correctly. Around her, the War room erupted in cautious celebration. They had done it. Humanity had survived, but Qin felt no triumph. Only exhaustion and the weight of all those who hadn't lived to see this moment. 40% of the fleet, hundreds of thousands of casualties, 12 evacuated colonies. What do we tell them? Her aide asked, waiting to draft a response. Qin looked at the holographic display, showing Earth scarred but unbroken. We tell them we accept. We tell them the war is over, and then we make sure that every species in this galaxy knows exactly what it cost the K-Therath to learn that humanity doesn't surrender. Not to impossible odds, not to superior force, not to anyone who thinks strength gives them the right to demand our freedom. She stood, addressing her staff one final time. We didn't win because we were stronger. We won because we were willing to pay a price they couldn't imagine. We won because humanity has spent its entire history learning how to survive things that should have killed us. And most importantly, we won because we fought for something bigger than ourselves. We fought for the idea that tyranny should never be easy, that conquest should never be cheap, that there will always be someone, somewhere, willing to stand up and say, no. The peace treaty was signed within a week. The K-Therath withdrew. The galaxy watched and learned, and in the years that followed, 17 species that had been conquered by the K-Therath launched their own rebellions, each one citing humanity's stand as their inspiration. The Dominion collapsed within a decade, brought down not by superior force, but by the simple idea that resistance was possible. Humanity had lost thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of lives, but they had won something more valuable. They had reminded the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. And that lesson would echo across the stars for generations to come. The end.